is Jeane Manning. Jeane is an investigative journalist who for years has been alongside of people like Brian, talking and visiting and reporting on new energy inventors and their technologies. And Jeane has a very unique capability in being able to break down these complex technical topics into digestible information that the mainstream public can assimilate. And that's why we wanted Jeane to be a strong part of our early program here, so some of these technologies and inventors can be presented to everyone. So I introduce Jeane Manning.
Hi. Are my mics working? Oh, I guess they are. Yeah. Love that music. That can kind of set the theme for a whole movement, I think. The I Choose Love. It reminds me of a conference that I was at years ago in Ottawa when prestigious science conference, and Dr. Marcel Vogel was speaking. He was a scientist with IBM many years, string of academic credits. And someone from the audience asked him, Dr. Vogel, what is the most powerful force? And Marcel Vogel said, the most powerful force in the universe is L-O-V-E, love. I think that the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto really backs that up too. His thousands of photographs of water crystals showing that the most powerful force is some sort of a subtle energy affecting the way water crystallizes is love and gratitude. So I'm really grateful to be here, and I'm your tour guide this morning. Metaphorically speaking, we'll be flying over a huge territory because the landscape that's dotted with new energy research and development is quite vast. In fact, one inventor alone said that he feels like he's found a whole continent full of discoveries. And I find it's a really exciting time because of the beauty of this new science. I'm just a reporter. My degree is in sociology, so I don't pretend to have the technical stuff down pat. We've got engineers and physicists on the program that you can ask the technical questions. I've been looking for the big picture of where this all fits in. I'm a grandmother now. I was young when I started this, but it's for the sake of the children that we do this. My first slide was a little whimsical music of the spheres. One of the inventors said to me that he thinks that in the near future we'll be tuning into the harmonic vibrations between the stars and planets for the source of our powers. Maybe it will be a little bit more mundane than that, but whatever we do, I have faith in the human spirit. And I've used the metaphor of a map to kind of give a framework to talking about where the new energy fits into the clean energy continent. It's incomplete, uncharted territory right now, and I put a mountain range in the form of a great divide down the middle of this clean energy scene because there is, in a way, the explorers, they have to climb up to a height where they can get a bigger perspective and look off into the distance and maybe toward the sea of energy that can be tapped. And also there's a hump that you have to go through if we're highly educated academically. It's a little harder to get to the point where you're looking at the non-conventional energy technologies because, I mean, I've got my skeptical brother-in-law and friends that kind of, yeah, I read the science magazines and you're a little bit deluded to think that this stuff is real. And if we want to be hip and fashionably skeptic, it's a little bit more of an emotional hump to go over to have the courage to look at the new energy technologies. We're going to we're going to figure out how to do this first. Or we'll go on past this because JeaneManning.com isn't up yet. When I get the new addition to my, go back, Coming Energy Revolution this fall, then the website will be up. But starting down to earth, so to speak, and then we can take the conventional renewals and combine them with something innovative, like in the case of Essential Innovations geothermal, combining it with artificial intelligence. And also geothermal can be combined with the Tesla disks, which William Baumgartner, who was going to be here as a speaker, is an expert in. And by the way, I'm going to, because he can't be here, I'm going to devote a considerable part of this to the Victor Schauberger approach that William Baumgartner is such an expert in. I visited him a few days ago and have included some of the slides from that visit. This is Jeff Hayes, the author of a book, Tesla's Engine, I think is the latest one, holding up one of the discs from boundary layer turbine. And Martin Berger is going to be talking about an innovative way to just kind of basically plunk an upside down egg beater windmill down into a riptide is kind of the basic of it. We'll be glad when he's got the small run-of-the-river ones going. And also still in the renewables section, you can combine the breakthrough magnetic motors, generators with wind and tidal and have something revolutionary. I hope that Mark Cummings will be talking a bit about tidal power at some time this weekend. And then there's also revolutionary approaches to solar. This gentleman down in the lower, your right hand, Alvin Marks, has an approach to solar that's more like what plants do in photosynthesis. He's an expert in polarizing light and nanotechnology, and there are students from, I think it's the University of Maine, that go down there every weekend and help him out, volunteer. So this is what the new energy movement needs, is the young blood, the volunteers that are helping these gentlemen. Alvin had funding from even the CIA at one point. They were interested in his solid panels more so than the flexible solar panels because they wanted them for their spy satellites. And then they got the information and went on and left him unfunded. They got what they wanted. And there are all sorts of paths right now. There's a company, I think it's Kanarka Technologies, that has innovative nanotechnology approach to solar. Printable films are coming. Solar will become a lot less expensive in the near future. This gentleman, Owen Barker, he's more the new paradigm, stacking solar cells with magnets together. And if anybody knows where he is, I'd like to know what happened to that invention. I had the privilege of naming the Sun Mill. The hydrogen scene. I was at a conference about 2 years ago, a major hydrogen fuel cell conference. A lot of good people putting their energy into this field. But I was really, really saddened. I'd heard ahead of time that my hero, Jeffrey Ballard of Ballard Fuel Cells, had decided that we have no choice except to build thousands of nuclear power plants to get the electricity to electrolyze water into hydrogen. But just to hear him in person giving this speech to 1,000 engineers, and they're all accepting this as a reality, I couldn't handle it because it's so unnecessary. If they would just open their eyes to the new alternatives. And that's what I call the Trojan horse, or I call it the hydronuke economy. And also, another thing about hydrogen is I'll be mentioning a scientist by the name of Professor Ruggero Santilli, who has a long string of academic honors and credentials and everything, really impressive scientist. And he has on his website that combustion of hydrogen takes 5 times more oxygen out of the atmosphere than combustion of gasoline. Check it out. If that's true, we've got to really look at this seriously. I like Roy McAllister's approach with the American Hydrogen Association, a bunch of volunteers that they're teaching people how to do it yourself, that approach to using hydrogen in small is beautiful. Now, blacklight power has been covered, so Brian O'Leary very ably talked about Randall Mills, so I won't really spend much time on that. Actually, I have to run through these slides really quick because we're short of time. And here we're getting into the new stuff. Hydrogen on demand. What a concept. You're driving your vehicle down the road. You don't have to have a tank, explosive potential bomb full of hydrogen, although those tanks are engineered now so they're not all that dangerous, but you don't have to have hydrogen pipelines, all that expensive infrastructure, because this is the approach that many of the new energy researchers are working on, is generating it at point of use. We'll meet a few of them. One of them is Professor Konarev in Russia. Again, a very, very well-credentialed scientist, does really serious science. And his process is 10 times cheaper in terms of the electrical input than standard electrolysis. And I think it's if you Google for Konarev, K-N-A-R-E-V, or Innoplaza is the website where his papers are up. And it explains more about his process. A note from our sponsor. So there's all these other different approaches. The carbohydrogens, I think, arc technology, the Jim Griggs. I expect that Ken Rauen might be mentioning that in his talk tomorrow. And, this is Professor Santilli. Magnagas.com is the website where you can read his papers and see his long string of credentials and check out that information about hydrogen, burning of hydrogen, taking out 5 times as much oxygen out of the atmosphere as combustion of gasoline. But his Magnagas is a revolutionary approach, and there's something about this process that does create a gas that has been tested, quite thoroughly tested, to actually put out more hydrogen through the tailpipe than it took for the combustion. Pretty incredible, but check it out. This is Jim Griggs again with the, you can't really see the details on that rotor in the top picture, but there are indentations that create a turbulence in the water. Basically what he started with is he was an engineer who was a specialty in energy efficiency and got to thinking about water hammer, the knocking in the pipes, that there's a lot of energy happening during that knocking of our pipes that we hate in the middle of the night. And so he created this rotor within a cylinder that creates turbulence in the water, and it seems that there's some sort of a cavitation or inward imploding bubbles taking place in there that generates heat, and so you have basically a furnace that doesn't require any fire underneath it to heat the water, so it's a lot safer. See the blue flame coming out of or it's not flame, but the blue steam coming out is quite an unusual feature of it. Again, Ken Rauen can tell us more of the technical details of that if he has time to. It was interesting about how long it takes for the establishment to get on the bandwagon, and very reluctantly too. Science magazine took some flack for even printing these articles about bubble fusion. This is some more inputting sound or frequencies and having these these bubbles implode so fast at the tremendous release of energy. And Infinite Energy magazine, which Dr. Malev published and is still published, the magazine's still publishing, they were 9 years ahead of this of the established magazines, because I remember in 1995 on their cover, Dr. Roger Stringham's picture and his sonocavitation process was a featured article. And now we're getting into the territory. One of the names for the process that was unfortunately given the name cold fusion is light element fusion, because the elements involved are a lot lighter. I really like that a lot better. Cold fusion has been thoroughly given a bad rap. In fact, somebody said that the most successful thing about the whole cold fusion field was the misinformation campaign against it. And here we have one of the students of John Dash and Dr. John Dash over in the corner picture, and we will be hearing from him tomorrow. Brian O'Leary covered the cold fusion story very well, and I won't have to go into that. But one thing I want to say that people like me, the tree huggers, the greenies, the very terminology that these scientists use, and I understand from their standpoint, they're talking about the nucleus of an atom, so of course you talk about nuclear this and nuclear that, and you're talking about atoms, so you talk about atomic this and atomic that. But boy, it doesn't go over well with the public. Just the very symbol, I don't know if you can see the little atom symbol up in the corner, that was shown on a TV screen when, at the same time that Dr. Stanley Pons was interviewed, and the association in the public mind is totally all confused. And we get the impression that it's just yet another variation of hot fusion, which the hot fusion process does totally mess up the materials of the equipment that's used. It ends up all radioactive. Some of the cold fusion experiments do have some smaller amounts of radioactive elements associated with them. And so it's certainly not the favorite of the environmental community because of all the misunderstanding about it. It's funny, there's one of the myths about new energy, it seems, is it came up a few days ago when a really nice man who works for a utility company, introduced me to a group, and he was mentioning coming to this conference, and he kind of passed it off as, but nothing is going to come of it because these new things are so expensive. And I thought, where have you been? Are you thinking about mega projects, solar satellites microbeaming down to the planet? Excuse me, but that's not my favorite. Or space elevator, or what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about hot fusion when you think that the new energy technologies are expensive? The whole point of the new energy technologies is small is beautiful and cheap. And some of the experimenters are making things out of roller skate wheels and bicycle wheels and tin foil. And the whole point is to come up with something empowering that somebody can make in their backyard. Here we have the late Paul Brown and Ken Shoulders, who thankfully is very much with us. A couple of the science pioneers who showed that it is possible to transmute elements in the experiments they do. If you excuse me just a moment, I want to find my notes on this. So just take a deep breath. You're probably tired of running through slides so quickly. Okay. I was going to follow my notes all along, but Rauen. just wanted to get this straight because Ken Shoulders does really important work. He developed much of the technology for microcircuitry, and he continues to make breakthroughs. And he found a way to make these charge clusters that contain an incredible number of electrons, and they're bunched together in a way that conventional textbooks say is impossible, but it's happening. And it may be the basis of the energy gain in so-called cold fusion. And he now calls these things exotic vacuum objects, or EVOs. And I'm really pleased to hear that what he's preparing to work toward now is toward direct electrical output generating systems using these EVOs to carry forward his previous work. And he's decided that he doesn't want to spend any more time on the systems that generate heat, such as the cold fusion experiments do. And his reason for turning away from those types of experiments is that they're self-destructive. Their metals get used and abused, put it in my words. So bear with us if you're not interested in technical details, but I just wanted to get this in, that he wants to use electrical trapping methods to contain a swarm of random EVOs. And this forced containment will prevent the EVOs from coming in contact with solid material and destroying it. So basically, it'll make the EVOs much easier to work with. And when these exotic vacuum objects are released from this electrical trap, they'll be in a form that resembles ball lightning, but not ball lightning in the wild, but instead ball lightning that can be harnessed to do work. So these are amazing little charge clusters that propel themselves, and the propulsion energy is many times more than the electrical energies that's put into the experiment. The source of all that extra power, it isn't proven, but it's theorized to come from zero-point energies that are provided whenever the motion of charges are resisted. And there's a physicist, Dr. Jacques Sarfati, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. He's furthered the theory, and so Shoulders just has to find a way to couple the amazing motion of these EVOs into what he says easily available circuitry. And then we'll have the electrical output that we need. This is Ed Wall and Ken Rauen in the red at the New Energy Research Laboratory back east. They've experimented with many approaches and tested and innovated a whole variety of new energy devices. I put the website for the magazine there, infiniteenergy.com. Ken will be speaking tomorrow, and he has a lot to tell us, so I won't pretend to translate it into my words, but one of the Infinite Energy covers said that simple tabletop experiment turns conventional heat theory upside down. The heat engine can tap into the heat of the environment in a way that really has been overlooked. So maybe it just seems to violate the law of thermodynamics, but on the other hand, maybe the law just it's time to reinterpret it, just like it was reinterpreted before nuclear fission. Know-it-all scientist says that's impossible, that violates the law of thermodynamics. So they had to reinterpret the law afterwards. And he says that the science to do this is known science and doesn't involve high-tech materials and doesn't involve high-tech processes. So that's good news for our small is beautiful and simple approach. A lot of the experimenters and scientists that I hear and read about in this field are mentioning resonance, so it's worth mentioning when we're trying to look for some common themes in and musically we understand resonance. Say you strike the A note on a piano and a nearby violin tuned the A string might vibrate. But everything in nature affects everything else. That's part of the understanding that's underneath the emerging science. because we're just made up of subatomic particles that are in perpetual motion. And the speed of the motion and type of motion affects its vibratory rate of frequency. Everything has its resonant frequency. Music and sound are ancient forms of resonance. Atoms, materials, magnetic fields, electric circuits, I'm told that they can all resonate. Like a child in a swing, you put in low power, push, 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 and eventually it amplifies into big results. We learn that at a young age. Again, I'm going to defer to Ken Rauen's talk. He can explain the water fuel cell experiments. And also, Terry Sisson is here, and I understand that he has thoroughly researched the Stan Meyer saga. Where are you, Terry? Okay. So during our discussions, I hope that we'll be able to get into some of that history. Stan Meyer is one of the giants in the research field, and not just because he was big as a football player, but because he pushed this idea of resonating the water molecule, and he ended up being controversial, his business practices and that sort of thing. I won't judge that, but it's interesting that a company in Alberta is building forward on his and other water resonating technologies. The Exogen patent refers to the late Dr. Andrija Puharic and the late Stan Meyer and other former patents. This Exogen company made a prototype of a home space heater and also a water heater. And the last I heard, they were getting into treating environmental waste. And then as a byproduct, they get hydrogen and oxygen from water at very low cost. So here again, it's that approach of getting the hydrogen at point of use. Think for a generator, space heater, car, whatever use you want. That is the goal. And they do talk about using resonant, or did talk about using resonant frequencies to persuade water molecules to loosen up their bonds. One researcher in Europe, Shad, told me that his device, going along the same lines, sings to the water. Well, maybe the molecule dances. Maybe those. So what's happening in the water molecule? The hydrogen and oxygen atoms are hugging each other so tightly. Maybe something about these resonant frequencies tickles them apart. I don't know. I'm just putting things simplistically. Another theme in some of the inventions. This is Tom Valone a few years ago holding a copy of William Hyde's electrostatic device, and that copy was built by George Hathaway. Tom Valone will be speaking, and he brings a lot of engineering expertise to it. He'll be talking about zero-point energy. Even in the national laboratories, they're learning a lot more about the background, what's happening in space. Here we have, at the Los Alamos National Lab, a Cray computer pictured the scroll-like waves that swirl everywhere in space. And I think that's quite beautiful. As Brian mentioned, this has many names, from ether to zero-point quantum fluctuations of the vacuum, or as Mark Cummings would tell us, the plenum of space. It's not an empty vacuum, it's full of seething, swirling energy that we could learn to harness and put to use if we make it a priority of our civilization. And there are other words that are a little bit less accepted, orgone, and then maybe related to, if you're in the alternative health field, you've heard about prana. That refers to a living energy. Maybe it's all related, or maybe it's on a continuum. I think what I've heard more lately is that there might be energies that are not just an extension of the electromagnetic spectrum, that they're not not maybe just a extremely high frequency, but maybe maybe you leap over to another spectrum. I don't know. These are just things that we should look into. And the researchers that are doing this range from PhD physicists to working under the shade tree. Now, Infinite Energy magazine and Dr. Malov had the courage to really go out on a limb. He visited the Koreas, Dr. Paulo and Alexander Korea up in Canada, their labs, and he was blown away by what he saw, but he examined it very carefully. This is not the Korea's lab. This is a scientist in Michigan who has orgone accumulators, which is connected with one of the experiments the Koreas have been doing, connecting a Stirling engine to orgone accumulator. But I'll just read you a few things that Dr. Malov said after he had visited the Korea's lab. And he said, I observed self-running electric motors at a visit to the Korea laboratory. I was shown the inside of the motor electronics box, and there were active elements such as batteries. He said, ether energy is real, and both physics and biology have a lot more to learn. And Dr. Malov said, I saw cup-sized electronics that charged a capacitor or a battery overnight. It's quite amazing. The Korea's papers are up at a website, aetherometry.com. And we're privileged to have Dr. Win Lambertson as one of our speakers. He's here today. So again, I won't pretend to give the details of someone's science, but rather to mention that this is a really important approach to the small is beautiful, clean, low-cost. We hope that it will be developed to this point of a commercial product that is relatively low cost and with no cost for fuel. He calls this the E-dam, with the analogy to the hydroelectric dam, but instead of water flow, it deals with electrons. And it seems that the theory is that zero-point energy is entrained when electrons are accelerated. I've heard of something similar with the Schauberger work, that during the acceleration is when, in their terms, they say the ether comes in. And he's had more output than input, 153%, and continuing to improve. This is an early version of his E-dam. And this took less than $1,000 to buy the electronics and other materials for this experiment, but more than 30 years of effort for a self-funded independent scientist to develop such breakthroughs. Credit to Dr. Lambertson. Another theme that I hear out on the frontier is shape power. A man named Dan Davidson has books out. I have his book, Shape Power, How Form Converts Universal Ether into Electromagnetic and Gravitic Forces. Dan Davidson has had a career in establishment science and physics, and it's really interesting, the experiments he's done with a man named Joe Parr. And he has concluded that certain shapes focus and transduce higher order energies into electricity and magnetism. He explained this concept of shape power as natural generators or foci of higher order energies. And I believe in one of Dr. Lambertson's experiments, he had pyramids. Pyramid is one of the shapes that seems to somehow resonate with whatever is happening in this invisible background universe. This is emerging knowledge, but it's also connected with something that goes back quite a ways. Concept popular in metaphysical circles is called sacred geometry. Dan Davidson says maybe it should be called sacred mathematics, but it implies that geometrical patterns do exist everywhere in space and are related to creation. But you don't need to just ascribe a mystical significance to geometrical patterns. If you're an experimenter, it seems you can observe results in the laboratory. And to find out about it, I suggest Dan Davidson's new booklet, Shape, Power, and Universal Resonance. This is the art of Walter Russell. In The Wave Lies the Secret. He was a visionary who, through his art, pictured unseen energies. I've included a few paintings also of another scientist, William Baumgartner, because we're in a liberal arts college. That gives something for the artists in the crowd. So getting into the concepts that are attributed to the late Victor Schauberger, you can kind of simplify things into a choice between the technologies that we have right now for generating energy, and actually, in general, you can talk a lot about a lot of our technologies. We have chosen, and the 20th century science has dealt all too much, it seems, with the motions that nature uses to destroy things. Our atomic power explodes the atom. Our combustion technologies burn something. So we have technologies, again, to oversimplify this, but look around you, the heat that's generated by our technologies, and listen out in the street to the noise that's generated by our technologies. So that's why a lot of people are gotten to the point where they say, I hate technology. But maybe they haven't considered that there's a different way to do things. Ilya Prigogine got his Nobel Prize, and he is somebody who proved that you can have certain systems where order comes out of chaos under certain conditions. Well, look at the self-organizing nature of these charge clusters that Ken Shoulders works with. And this all may be quite a simplification, but it appeals to me when the Schauberger technologists say that we could use something entirely different for 21st century energy. We could use the motions that nature uses to create the inward spiraling instead of outward exploding. And instead of generating heat, these motions in their proven devices do have a cooling effect. And it's working instead of on pressure, like our 20th century noisy technology is founded on using pressure, pushing. But I'll show you some of the spiraling pipes that create a suction effect, quite the opposite. And it's contracting and concentrating some form of energy, it seems, in quiet devices that don't require fuel. But the whole point of Schauberger's work was to revitalize water or air. And he said we were going in the wrong direction. Callum Coates has written a whole series of books translating Victor Schauberger's works. And I understand that Alec Bartholomew has also written a new book to kind of put it in even simpler terms. I shouldn't keep mentioning Victor Schauberger without telling you who he is. He was an Austrian naturalist, lived 1885 to 1958, and he pioneered this understanding of how nature works. Through his work, he had the ability to observe nature in its pristine state in unusual detail. And he decided to make various sorts of inventions to prove these concepts. And they actually did prove that there's a different way to do things. These machines based on the inward spiraling, it's called Implosion Technology, where there's a vacuum, there's a temperature reduction. It's interesting, he found that the egg is the only closed shape that naturally generates a movement of the vortex. And vortices are one of the basis of his work. This is William Baumgartner with a taken apart fish motor that he built. And so the whole basis of the Schauberger different approach to energy generating machine is in this diagram, the two opposite motions in nature. You've got the one that's the dying part of the cycle in nature, and nature has both, and it also has a creative part. You know, in our school textbooks, we get the impression that entropy is the only game in the universe. Entropy being the everything's falling apart point of view. I wonder if society would be a little bit different if we stopped to think that everything doesn't have to fall apart. It's interesting how the way we think about technology might kind of ease over into how we think about the direction our society is going. Because, I mean, we're taught that you can't get a free lunch and everything is running downhill, and it's all very depressing. But nature just doesn't tear things apart and destroy. And I wonder if we were working with the creative part of nature's cycle more, and we had technologies that revitalized water as the water goes through the pipes, as in Schauberger's work, and the air is cleaned, how different society might be. You know how different you feel out in the forest where the air is full of vitality? We're a lot less likely to commit mayhem or have road rage when we're out in the forest path. And it's partly that it's quiet and it's aesthetically pleasing. The spiraling shapes in nature are pleasing. But I think that just breathing revitalized air might have broader effects on society. I said I was going to include some of the art. This is a portion of a painting by William Baumgartner. How about Walter Russell's seeing the universe as two-way cycles, radiation and generation. And William used to put out a publication, and this is some of the drawings he put in about nature's ways and the different shapes, and how working with the knowledge of how energy moves in nature can be translated into energy technologies. Using a balance, if we went totally to just implosion, we'd have unbalanced machinery too, but right now we just have predominantly explosive and outward spiraling and radiating technologies and heat-producing technologies. So maybe we can move the balance more toward implosion technologies. Tornado power. And the suction turbine design, William and his wife used to put out a magazine called Energy Unlimited and published some of these designs, and then he put out a publication called Causes that explained these vortexian mechanics, but now he has things up on a website. And these twister pipes are part of the Schauberger approach to getting the medium, whether it's water or air, to spiral through, and in the process entrain the ether energy. This was when William Baumgartner had a lab in Albuquerque, the spiraling. It's not really as clear as I've got on my screen. The other picture is taken in Europe, one of the originals of Schauberger home generator technology. There's the twister pipes. And this is back years ago when William had to build everything by hand, first carve out from wood and then make the molds. But now he has access to a prototyping machine, and this is where the new advances in technology, maybe our time has come because some of these things really support doing the unusual approaches, because the prototyping machine can build anything that you design. It doesn't have to be straight lines and pipes as we know them. You just design it on the computer and it cranks it out. Their prototyping machine only puts out miniature models, but they've been able to test some of the Schauberger devices with these miniature models. Another advance that's made it possible for some inventions that weren't possible before is super fast electronic switching. Okay, this is, I'm sure the technical people here haven't seen this before. This is William Baumgartner translated the Schauberger patent for something called a heart pump. Victor Schauberger had all sorts of incredibly different motors and generators, where there was the Apple design and the heart pump. And I think the reason he called it the heart pump is William was explaining to me that it lifts the water or air or whatever's going through it. It lifts the air like in an artesian well, seems to go against the laws of gravity, but actually it's like the blood in our veins. I don't know if this is so, but somebody said that our heart's really just valves, and it's the pulsating that happens inside the veins that pumps the blood upward. Whatever, that's what happens in this unusual technology. This is a part of that heart pump. And here they've, with the help of that prototyping machine, built a model of it. It's being tested down in Vancouver. So this is a model of their home generator. The cap's taken off, and inside that rotor part, the part just under the shaft is a bunch of, or 6 twister pipes. And here you can see in a little closer, little nozzles coming out. The water goes up from the reservoir and down and through the twister pipes. The twister pipes, the diameter is large at the top, but then gets smaller and smaller toward the bottom. And by that time, it's picked up so much velocity that it's being sucked along. It's an amazing speed, and then it comes out those nozzles and hits the teeth to go back down into the reservoir. Now, this experiment is a model of what was Schauberger's flying disc. It's called the wavy plate. William Baumgartner is working with a team of researchers in Europe, and they, back and forth, build some parts with the prototyping machine in Vancouver and send them overseas, get tested in Germany, and constant contact. And of course, they can send all their information over the internet, and that's really made a difference in bringing a new technology, the experimenters cooperating together. This is this wavy plate where the medium comes up through the metal and then pulses out, spiraling out toward the outside. He's got a raised part on the top of the ridges. And what it creates is an expansion and contraction, and he says that's where the ether energy comes in, at those points of expansion and contraction. And this is a different one. This is William Baumgartner's steam generator. It's more in the category of a mechanical heater, more like what Jim Griggs built, only with a conical-shaped rotor. So you put in a relatively small amount of mechanical energy in from the drive motor and get a large amount of heat out within seconds or a minute. It's too hot. The water that comes out is too hot to touch. And this is putting out a small volume because it's a small prototype, but it's, again, a proof of principle that these turbulent effects, I guess there's this cavitation going on in there too. More of Williams depicting his scientific concepts through art. This was inspired by the magnetic fields, and again, his art about magnets. Is Brian Eckert here? Brian has visited Europe recently and brought some photos of the one is the interior of a twister pipe, and the other is one of Schauberger's generators. Now, I mentioned Brian Eckert's work. He's brought over the Schauberger agricultural implements also, and this is really important. Brian O'Leary told us that we need to look at the big picture to revitalize our forests, and of course Alden Bryant has been telling this for a long time too, and revitalize water and agriculture, all these areas. That's one of the things I like about, I really love and appreciate actually about Brian O'Leary's ability to see the big picture. When I met him about 10 years ago and I interviewed him and I found his story of having the courage to leave the cushy job in academia and everything, and his whole odyssey quite compelling, and I wrote an article on spec for a prominent New Age magazine. I thought they would really appreciate all this understanding of new paradigm, because Brian was looking into the new energy scene by then, and editor got back to me and said, well, we just ran an article about new energy, and I explained, well, this is not just incremental improvements to what we already have, but quantum leap to something different that we're talking about. And then she said, well, we'd have to educate our readers. So she rejected it. Didn't get published. I wanted to mention, now this is not into over unity energy devices, but it's related to the Schauberger work, and I think that Dennis Heinrich's systems could fit in to some of the areas we're talking about. He wants to fire up the creativity of university students, because he's planning a $10,000 prize to students to work on his radial torque drive systems. So the bottom line is that we could have technologies that are quiet and run smoothly. He happens to see fractals everywhere. I think that's partly what inspired his work. And this is his, it's really too dark. You can't see the fractal cities painting that he did. Sorry about that. How am I doing for time? 5 minutes, okay. Magnets, another theme. Here, Dr. Napier is discovering that the new super strong magnets are so strong that a strong man can't push the opposing poles together, or a strong man can't pull them together when they're stuck together. And some are asking the questions of whether magnets somehow interact with ether energy. I would suggest that you go to Harold Aspin's website. That doesn't show up there. The new one is aspden.org. There are a number of inventors who are working along this line. One of the people, this show is by no means all-inclusive, and it's no judgment on who's best and who's not. One of the really important researchers that I didn't get a photo of in here, Mark Goldus and his Magnetic Power Incorporated, and he also has website ultraconductors.com, which I refer you to. So the whole point I'm trying to make is there's this whole rich variety of approaches. So if somebody says to you that they for some reason, reject the new energy technology, ask them how many of the approaches they've looked at. Maybe they just ran into one and heard something about it and decided, no, that's not for me. The so-called Tesla technology has gotten a bad rap. People have gotten the impression that all it is big throwing lightning bolts to the sky, and the popular television programs about Tesla have kind of reinforced that. You don't hear about his work with radiant energy, or the legend about the car that he drove on free energy. Tom Valone can tell you more about the experiment of the Russians, Rauen and Garbon, who built a prototype of John Searle's generator, and it did gain power, and it cooled the room strangely. It lost weight. It really was quite incredible. 15 meters away, they measured cooling in the room. So there's a new science, and Tom can tell you about the attempt to get NASA to look at that. I wouldn't look there. Another area on the map is what they call cold electricity. The book by Peter Lindemann is a good start on that. He unraveled the mysteries of the motor by the late Edwin Gray. This is a photo, I think, from his book of Ed Gray with a light bulb that's powered by his apparatus, and it's underwater. If that were ordinary electricity, everybody there would be electrocuted. So there's something strange going on. Johann Grander in Austria is another inventor I've met who years ago invented some sort of magnetic motor, and he was running a hair dryer, and somebody tossed it into a bathtub of water to show that this is something different happening, folks. This is a different kind of electricity. It's safe. Nobody got electrocuted. Shauna here is a 10-year-old who built a science project of a battery charging demonstration. John Bedini is the inventor who helped her build it. I mean, he told her, and she did what he told her. And this is a whole area of research that I guess I don't have time to go into, but I urge you to go to John Bedini's website because he is doing really important work too. The bottom line there is he points out that you don't have to have big cyclotrons, you don't need big laboratories. He's got this case for CDs, you know, the 50-pack of CDs. Inside he's got this little motor running on, I think it's a milliamp battery and charging a 48 amp tractor battery. I've seen batteries in his shop that were ancient, and he has this method of rejuvenating batteries. Solid state, well, this category is actually where Dr. Lambertson's work fits in, and others, Tom Bearden's Motionless Electromagnetic Generation and so on. I just happen to have pictures of John Hutchinson and his crystal converters, and recently he said he has had a breakthrough too. What did he say last week? New discovery with new materials, and he laced cotton pads with an oxide, which multiplied the power levels 20 times compared to the old cell. Even, he said 1 cubic centimeter now puts out 1.3 volts, and he figured a square foot would be a large source of energy. He thought that this oxide was very ionic, and used something that's a known material in making transistors. So anyway, I'm glad to see that he's continuing his experiments. Time to end? Okay. We'll just fast forward. I just want to mention that the university students everywhere are being turned on when they get on the web and go to JLN Labs website, and it's like a virtual laboratory on the internet, and experiment with these lifters and come to the conclusion that there's a different science happening out there. Dr. Chukhanov and his ball lightning work, his daughter there is his interpreter, and families are very important. So back to the map, and we will end with people power. We do have the power, we just need to turn on our people power, turn off the corruption.
Questions will go for you tonight at the panel session.
Right, okay, great.
Thank you, Jeane. We're going to defer any questions for Jeane for tonight's panel session. She'll be one of the panel members. So in a moment, we'll dismiss for lunch. For those of you who do not have a meal ticket and you want to go to a restaurant locally, what I would suggest is that when you leave the parking lot, take a left on Woodstock and then take a left on 39th Street. And continue down 39th, and there'll be streets such as Belmont and Hawthorne. There's lots of restaurants along those. I ask that we reconvene at 1:45 promptly so that we don't have to cut short Dr. Tom Valone and Dr. Stephen Greer. One other thing, there's been a lot of inquiry about websites and how do I get this information and that. Steve Kaplan had put together a New Energy Movement resource guide, which you should be able to find at the New Energy Movement table out front. Okay, please drive safely if you're leaving the campus and be back promptly at 1:45. Thank you.